What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Bridging the Gap here on the Jersey First TV network. As always, I'm AJ Malillo,
And I'm Stephen Rombolo.
and we have another great episode in store for you. But before we get into the news, let's talk to Stephen about a little bit of what's going on in his life. How was your week, Stephen? How you doing? Anything crazy happen?
I mean, nothing crazy. Just another week in the books. Summer's coming, winding down. So, getting excited for fall. Fall weather, fall outfits, fall activities.
Sure.
Can't
Love the
wait.
fall.
I'm a big fan of the fall. As much as I am like a summer boy. Oh, I did have a birthday last week.
That's true. You did have a
That's
birthday last week.
that is true. So that's been fun, feeling like an old man. What are you gonna do? The old age of 24. It's
That's
really
right.
my back's been hurting a lot more.
Knees are buckling and cracking, and
Yeah, it's downhill quick. I say 40s over the hill. I think it's 24. I think they lie. No, it's been good though. Things are great, but I mean, you had an incredibly exciting week. To say
yeah,
the
yeah. Orientation week over at Villanova Law School. So, first week of law school, really. I mean, at this point, classes start Monday. Pretty exciting stuff. Met a lot of new people. Very fun, very exciting. Smart crew over there at Villanova Law. So, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I'm super stoked to get going. Telling everybody I'm from the Jersey Shore is fun, too. Like, yeah, I'm from the Jersey Shore. They say, like where? It's like where the show is filmed, Jersey Shore. And they're like, oh. And I'm like, yeah.
That's got to be such a such a hit every time you say it.
Oh, yeah, people love it. They'll either, like, poke fun or they'll be like, that's awesome. But if they poke fun, it's just like, it's a good time, man. I don't know what to tell you.
You just turn your back and pump your fists, right?
Exactly.
And it's a small class too, correct?
Yeah, there's like 180 something. So nothing crazy. And then we're split up into 3 sections of 60. So get to really know everybody as the year goes on. So I'm excited for that. Really getting to know the whole class. And there's a bunch of people, different life experiences, whole things. There's people that are like twice my age. There's people that have kids my age. There are people that came straight from undergrad, and there's people that worked and were in the military and the whole nine. So a whole bunch of different diverse outlooks and things. So super excited to start up.
It's gonna be a great place for you.
Oh yeah. Pumped up. But let's start with the news. What do you say, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, good place to start for our news show, right?
Yeah, I would say so.
Um, might as well pick up where we left off, sort of on our last episode. Um, oh wait, I mentioned my birthday as if this didn't happen on my birthday. It was the best birthday gift of the year when they raided Trump's house, the FBI. They have a few more updates off that. So when we had originally reported on that story, it was, I want to say, like 2 or 3 days after. We
Right.
had very little detail, weren't really sure even what they were looking for. It had just come out. I remember it was like less than an hour before we taped that Merrick Garland had came out and made statements about wanting to release the warrant and everything, which we have pulled up and we'll share with you guys. It's a pretty interesting document, gives you a itemized list. I mean, obviously there's some redactions for, things that the public isn't supposed to see at the moment because uh, this is an ongoing investigation of a criminal nature. So there are certain things that they just can't
Yeah,
put out.
names of sources, things like that.
Yeah, and items as well that were taken that might be pertinent, especially because the reporting is that these documents pertain to nuclear security and defense systems. Also, things about the president of France, which is a little bizarre. Um,
Supposedly.
yeah, allegedly. All of this is alleged because we don't have any concrete proof, documentation, or statements from anybody credibly involved to say with absolute certainty. Um, but they took about 15 boxes worth of things out of the Trump house. If you want to go ahead and share the screen real fast, we have pulled up here. This is the search warrant that Merrick Garland was talking about last week, releasing, that a judge then approved them to release. So as you can see, I'll go up for a hot second here. So this was stamped on the 11th, which is when they released it. Search warrant, not including the affidavit. We'll get into that in a minute. Just talking about, go down, the state's district court. So this is saying, I want to get to the right part here. Right here, you were commanded to execute this warrant on or before August 19th. So these guys issued on the 5th, chose to move 3 days later on the 8th. It's a no-knock warrant anytime during the day, 6 to 10, because there really probably is no better way to go about entering the home of a former president. You can't really just let them know, like, hey, we're stopping by to, take these documents that we might be hiding. So that's the utility of a no-knock. This I thought was just remarkably interesting on like a personal note, because it details the property in Mar-a-Lago, 58 bedrooms, 33 bathrooms.
Right. Well, it is also a resort, to be fair. Like, it's a resort and personal residency.
Yeah. It's staggering the amount of space there. But they also include, as you can see right here, I'll highlight the 45 office, which is, his presidential office where he was down there doing all that work when he was taking those trips down there. This page is essentially outlining everything they were looking for. So kind of the meat of the search warrant: physical documents, classification markings, communications regarding national defense, and then anything with presidential records. So this all comes, we found out a few days later that the National Archives had kind of flagged the Justice Department down. We're like, hey, these documents don't, seem to be here, and they should be. So that was what they were outlining there. This is the receipt for property. So this is on the day of, and I remember we had talked about this. After the federal government seizes property from you, they are required to give you an itemized list. And this is essentially what would have been given to the president, former president, and, what we're now seeing labeled. So it's just, where they searched, who received it, took the items, and then detailed like description of all of the things that they had took. So again, it seemed like a big news story day of, the attorney general wants to release the search warrant and this and that or whatever. But then you end up reading things like, number 3 here, potential presidential record, binder of photos, miscellaneous secret documents, miscellaneous top secret documents, box labeled A27. It's not really the smoking gun for the story that I think anybody was expecting it to be, to reveal detail-wise, at least, what exactly they were looking for there. It was more just a show of transparency, and I think brilliantly on Merrick Garland's part as the Attorney General to be like, listen, a judge signed off on this. We knew what we were going in there for. We took exactly what we came for, nothing more, nothing less. We can't share everything with you because of the sensitive nature of these things, but this is legitimate. And I think, that's important for Merrick Garland in his position, especially this being, an extraordinarily high-profile case, to prove that there was some sort of legal legitimacy in it. Because day of August 8th, you had essentially an eruption on both sides of the political aisle. You had the left, blowing up in excitement, like, oh my God, they're going to get him, and the Biden administration and associates of the administration are, kind of under this pressure now to indict this guy. And it's a very slow moving case, right? And then same thing on the day of, you had people who were like, this is another hit on the president. They're weaponizing the Justice Department, to nail this guy, and he's innocent and this and that or whatever. Merrick Garland, by releasing the document that we just showed you, in my opinion, very excellently kind of just treaded the middle and said, listen, it's not this smoking gun indictment. It's not this attack. We presented this to a judge. We went in, we got it. You see it here, right? Missing or, miscellaneous top secret documents, presidential note, handwritten note, binder of photos, info on President of France. So very clearly, at least what we have access to, seems to be like there was a legitimate reason for this search. All of that being said, we're talking 10 days later now, and obviously things have been moving. So we find out, that at some point Donald Trump had agreed to return some of these documents. Maybe he didn't return them all, during the transition, kept some of them at Mar-a-Lago. report pieces that McCarthy, who's a former federal prosecutor, who seems to think that this is less about the documents and more so that the AG and the Justice Department are going to use this investigation as a way to tie him into a lot of the ongoing January 6th investigations. Moral of the story here is we have a better idea now of what was taken, what they're looking for, but we still, at the end of the day, because it's an ongoing investigation, really have no idea what the end goal is going to be and what the Attorney General and the Justice Department want it to be. We don't know what they're trying to get at, and we don't know what they're going to get at. So I think it's a really interesting place news-wise. Obviously important to keep up on tabs and reporting it, because this is quite literally the biggest story in the nation at the moment. But until we get some more substantial details and documents about, the actual hard facts of this case, because again, and I know we said it last week, I think it's so important to remember that this is a legal issue. So we're dealing with legal procedure, legal processes. We're dealing with rights of accused. And, again, today a judge had issued a statement essentially saying that the government has not met the burden showing why the entire affidavit for the raid should remain sealed. So he actually ordered that by next Thursday, the 25th of August, the government is going to have to file basically all their proposed redactions with a memorandum setting forth the reason for those redactions to the affidavit, and it'll be reviewed. And it looks like that's going to be released, I would say probably within the next 2 weeks. So
yeah. And I think what's important about that, too, just to note, is that the Trump team did argue for the release of the entire affidavit. Yeah. The FBI was trying to fight that the affidavit should be sealed completely. The judge found judgment was somewhere in the middle, obviously. And I think what is also interesting when it comes down to this stuff, there's two other things that are quite interesting. If you look at the warrant and the codes that they cite, the criminal codes that they cite, so one was gathering, transmitting, or losing defense information, which carries up to 10 years in prison. The concealment, removal, or mutilation generally, which carries up to 3 years in prison, and the destruction, alteration, or falsification of records in a federal investigation, which carries up to 20 years. But all of those, what I think is interesting about those three charges is it doesn't matter if they're classified or not, right? They just deal public records that deal with, an ongoing case that were concealed, hidden, or destroyed. So I think that that's an interesting point. So it's like classified documents, yeah, that's an interesting case, but the charges that they're going after the former president for don't really have to deal with classified information too much.
Yeah, well, and I would say, and I think you are going to agree with this, that's probably by design, because they really, in all honesty, probably had no idea if the documents he took were actually classified or not.
Right.
And it's sort of an easier blanket statement to pull on those strings, that are speaking broad generalities that you can kind of blanket.
Well, that's why it's the warrant. Warrants are intentionally broad. I think that's important to put in there. Like so basically they have this warrant that's intentionally broad so they can pick up, items from as many items as they possibly can, plus any other items that they could have seen that could have dealt with criminal activity. Like that's pretty much the point of a search warrant. So what I also think is pretty interesting about all of this is how Trump is responding to these things, right? So we've seen a couple of different tactics from Donald Trump and his team from a legal defense standpoint, right? So the first things first, it's like, I'm the president of the United States. I could declassify anything that I wanted to classify just by saying it's declassified, right? So there are legal scholars that agree with the president on that, and there are legal scholars that disagree. That's a constitutional issue for sure, right? That's something that's going to go to the Supreme Court if it's argued, is whether or not the president can just say, I hereby declassify everything on my table right now. Kind of like when the Pope, blesses all of those rosary beads, that they sell for $1 outside of the Vatican. And then there's ones that they actually bless, in the holy water and they touch. And then there's some that they just kind of bless. But so those are blessed. But does classifying documents work the same way? I don't know. That's up for constitutional debate. Now, what's interesting about that, though, is that the Trump administration themselves argued in court and won that when Donald Trump tried to classify something or declassify something on Twitter, that wasn't an official declassification. So I think that's an interesting wrench in that argument. But one argument...
Not to interrupt you, is that when he shared those pictures of that our spy planes took?
I think so. I don't remember exactly. I just remember like that was basically the case. He like said, "Oh, that's declassified" on Twitter. But yeah. So
that has to be it. That has to be it.
So then the other thing that is Trump is trying to be as transparent as he possibly can. Like, look, I got nothing to hide. Release the affidavit. Release everything. I'm here to help. So he's trying to play the almost. I have nothing to hide. I'm not guilty. Do your worst type of thing. So I'm interested to see how that will that defense will play out. And I think honestly, that's a strong one. If you have nothing to hide, be like, this is ridiculous, but I'll help you just in the name of transparency. I'll be as transparent as I possibly can.
Well, I think in the legal world, that's like the most comparable, like high risk, high reward, right? Because
right.
You're opening the door. You're like, hey, man, I'm not hiding anything. Do your worst. And then if they come in and like actually do their worst, we're not talking about, Nowhereville, USA Police Department. We're talking about the Federal Bureau of Investigation, right? This is an organization with a lot of money, a lot of smart people. And, unfortunately, as we've seen, I would say for the past almost 7 or 8 years, starting with Comey, I mean, even before that, but a political body, essentially, that has motivations that may be extrajudicial, which, take issue. We should all take issue with that. Not the point of the conversation. So I'm curious to see how that method plays out for him, because it could either work brilliantly and he could be like, listen, I was compliant the whole time. I gave them everything they needed. They still couldn't find anything. This is a clear hit piece. Or I opened the door. They came in. They found everything. Uh-oh.
Right. Well, so there's a couple of things here. So I think that this case clearly galvanized the Republican base behind Trump. Like I think that a lot of Republicans, after this happened, this has never happened to a president before. This is another clear political hit, like they've been doing on Donald Trump. This is the Republicans are like, this is our guy. Like, there's nothing that you can do. Now we're definitely with him. And some independents probably felt that way too. But then at the same time, obviously, the Democratic base is like, we're going to get him. He's not going to be able to run again. And I think that that's the next interesting point to make, is that the media and the Democrats, I think, have been trying to make this case that if they can get Donald Trump on this stuff, then he won't be able to be the president again. But as we know, Stephen, the Constitution is the highest law of the land, and the Constitution makes a very, very clear who can run and who cannot run for president. And you can run for president if you're a convicted felon. That's clear.
Eugene V. Debs in, I believe it was the 40s, ran from prison.
Right. And if you think that Donald Trump in an orange jumpsuit wouldn't run for president of the United States, you're crazy. He obviously would. And he would obviously win votes, and a lot of them. Right? So they would have to impeach and convict the president in Donald Trump in the Senate to actually remove his ability to run for office. And I think that, just really briefly, something to touch on is what I find really interesting is you can't vote as a felon, but you can run for president as a felon. And personally, I mean, my personal opinion, you probably shouldn't be allowed to do either as a felon. But it's so interesting that people seem to think, because there is part of the statute, one of the statutes that says directly, if you're convicted of it, you lose right to hold public office, but that doesn't count for the presidency also.
No, just out of curiosity, do you know why that is?
Because the presidency is one of the, I think, the only public office that has such a direct, like the Constitution directly says, this is what you need to be the president, and this is what this is what, like, the qualifications you need to be able to run for president, and this is how you can no longer run for president. And because it has both of those things, like, this is how you can and this is how you're no longer allowed to, that's the final say on the president. I think it's a constitutional issue. Obviously, I think that would go to the Supreme Court most likely, but there's a precedent, not a precedent, that the presidential candidate can run from office too, or from run for prison rather. So
Yeah, I'd be interested to see how that plays out, if that were to go to the court. Just because I mean that's like prime battle of our jurisprudential opinions right there.
right. Well, I think that'll be fun, and obviously the story is developing. There's more that's coming out, and really we'll see what the voters think. Like, does this galvanize the Republicans, saying like this is just another political hit? Can the DOJ find something that is a smoking gun after all these years of trying to? I mean, I don't think so. I think that nothing's going to come of this, like nothing came of anything else. But I've been wrong about things in the past. Rarely, very rarely, but I have. So we'll see.
Um, I mean, what I'll say, and I'll make this brief, but I think it's an important point to make. Um, since this man took office, since probably even before he took office, there's been what appears to be very concise, clear, and concentrated efforts to make sure that he does not hold this position of high power. And even while he was in this position of high power, the only president to be impeached twice, you know what I mean? Like, there's very clear. I can understand why, to somebody who's a supporter of this man, it appears that this is like a hit job. They're just trying to keep him out of office.
Right. Well, because everything else has also failed completely, and like, if anything, backfired.
That's totally fine. That's totally fine. The point that I think is just important to highlight is the flip side of that is there is a large portion of this country that very clearly is clamoring and looking for any reason to keep this man out of office. And I think that they are just as warranted in feeling that way as is the portion of the population that feels that these are hit pieces, right? Like, very clearly, a portion of the population thinks that he is a good president and we should run our country like we run a business. He's a businessman. And then there's a portion of the country that says this man is a threat to the democratic principles and customs of this country. And on that basis alone, he shouldn't be here. He's unethical.
Yeah, I think one of those sides has a proper cause of saying like he should be able to run, and if we want him to be the president, he should be the president. And the other side says he shouldn't even be allowed to run. And there's just because we don't like him and we think he's unethical. Like, that's kind of ridiculous.
I think that it would be a really sad and dark day in this country if, after what happened on January 6th, that man ascends to the presidential office again.
I think that it's fair to say that, right? Like, if you to say, I think if this man becomes president again, that would be a sad day for our democracy. I don't necessarily agree, but I think that that's fair. But that's not saying he shouldn't be allowed to run for president, right? You could say, I don't want my fellow Americans to vote for the man for president. Okay, that's fine. Like, sure, have that opinion. But barring him from running for president and trying literally everything you can since 2015 to bar the man from running for president is just, it's asinine. That's, in my opinion, a threat to democracy. Like, you don't like the guy, beat him.
It goes both ways. I mean, we did. So,
so it's easy, right? Like, you've done it once, and you supposedly did it very, very fairly. People love Joe Biden, so he is super loved, beloved guy. Let me tell you, Mr. Biden. So sure,
I just think it's
very easily, very fairly.
My point is, and this is a larger much larger commentary. It's interesting that we find ourselves in a position where everybody agrees. Like, this has gone to the point now where there are federal agents knocking on the door of a former president, taking items out of his home, whether you like him or not, disrupting his daily peace. Like, at this point, he's a private citizen doing, whatever he wants. the fact that we've kind of let this feeling, this division, boil over to this uh, frightens me, because now the conversation that we just had, the past 3 minutes, one side's trying to be undemocratic and barring him from, running again. The other side is supporting an undemocratic candidate, right? Like, who has a track record now of doing things that are like, lean anti-democratic, like, you know, the whole January 6th incident and his involvement in that. Um, this is a crisis, like, point blank. Like, it's unfortunate that there is a man in the middle of it, like sitting at the flashpoint of it. Like, it would suck if it was Joe Biden, if it's Donald Trump, if it's Barack Obama. Like, it doesn't matter who it is, but the point is that this is all around an individual, and it's really easy to have this conversation about the individual and ignore the larger problem, which is we need to be more conscientious of our candidates, and we should really, as a country, work towards this collective idea of, like, this is the kind of person we want leading the country. Somebody who stands for X, Y, and Z values, who has X, Y, and Z characteristics. And because you hear all the time, oh, it's just the choice of the lesser of the two evils. And I've said this before, you've said it before, everybody worth their salt has said it before. It doesn't have to be that way. It's actually not supposed to be that way. Like, we're operating in a broken system for the past, I would argue, 20 years when it comes to general elections. So hopefully, if nothing else, this story, whatever the outcome may be, wakes America up, wakes the voting population up, and forces us to be more conscientious and thoughtful about the people that we nominate to hold the highest office in the land, the most important job in the world, the President of the United States, the leader of the free world. That is something that we should take very seriously as the voting, like, citizenry of this republic. And hopefully this doesn't, because
Yeah, I tend to agree.
times.
Yeah, I tend to agree. It's like be careful who you vote for, and understand that primaries matter, and you don't want to pick the lesser of the two evils. Well, then pick the not evil guy or gal in the primary, and then you won't have that issue, will you? So, and then also just like secure elections, like it shouldn't be a boogeyman to say, well, we need to make sure that we're all on the same page, that our elections are safe and secure, because if people feel like they're not, that means that something is wrong, right? Something is wrong there if people feel like elections aren't secure or safe or fair, right? So fix that problem. Don't be like, oh, well, you saying that means that you're a conspiracy theorist. No, like, if people feel that way, then have the conversation, because that's important in a democracy, right? To feel like your vote matters and it counts and it's fair and things are going right, even if you lose. Like, but yeah. So let's move on to the next story, though, because we have only a certain amount of time. And I think the next story is a pretty interesting one, in my opinion. And this is a conversation that Steven and I have had many times, and I'm interested to hear his take, because I feel like we used to disagree, but maybe this story is a bit different. So basically, the gist of the story is that there was a former New York Times reporter named Alex Berenson, who he was a health reporter, and he left the New York Times, and especially during the COVID pandemic, he was accused of spreading misinformation on Twitter and was eventually banned on Twitter. So he wound up in a lawsuit against the social media company, where they had to admit error and restore his account. And basically, it was a free speech case, right? So he was talking about vaccine hesitancy and how the vaccine is not all that they're telling you. And this was a highly respected reporter for the New York Times at one time. And he was talking about how, basically just reluctance and hesitancy towards the vaccine. So Mr. Berenson wrote on his Substack an article entitled the First Amendment does not apply to private companies like Twitter. And basically, he argued that these tech companies are the public square and the First Amendment should apply to a company like Twitter, which is where people are spreading information and talking back and forth and dialoguing. But the interesting thing about this case in particular was that there was clear evidence of Twitter talking with members of the Biden administration about people to take off of their platform and shut down their voices as possible spreaders of misinformation and disinformation on their platform. And there's email chains, there's like actual physical evidence that these conversations went on. So what we know for certain is that when it comes to your constitutional rights, there are certain areas that businesses can restrict rights that the government cannot. Like you can't do certain things in Walmart that you might be able to do at a public park, right? But if the government is compelling a company to act within their interest that abridges a constitutional right, well, then that is certainly not allowed. And that is an abridgment of your constitutional rights. So what we saw in this case in particular is that is exactly what was going on. Alex Berenson was a member, and we can talk about it there, of one of multiple members that they kind of made this web of disinformers on Twitter that should be basically taken off the platform. And some of the names include Alex Berenson, Clay Travis, who's like a sports reporter, and Elon Musk, right? So super interesting case, super interesting from a constitutional perspective. And I'd love to hear your thoughts, Stephen, on if you think that Alex Berenson should have been rightfully won this case. What do you think about, and then going forward, is this a case that is ushering in this sort of new look at what the role of these social media companies are in our public discourse?
Yeah, I mean, so I'll say this much. I'm going to give you the cop-out answer, and I'm going to say off the jump, it's hard to say whether or not he should or shouldn't be allowed on the platform because I have no idea what this guy actually said on the platform, right? Like that matters a whole lot. So we can juggle through the logistics and like the legal thought experiment, which is always fun and is productive conversation. But in terms of like him very specifically, I don't know what kind of things he was saying. I don't know how they, interact with Twitter's policies because at the end of the day, right, the most important thing for me when I'm thinking about this case is it's fun, like I said, to talk about the hypothetical of viewing Twitter as this public entity now, right, where it is the public square and you are afforded these free speech rights. But that's not the case at the moment. Twitter is still a privately owned company. They have not been declared as the public square, for term's sake, and they don't have to abide by those free speech requirements. So if what he was saying was in violation and you clearly make that, demarcation like, hey, this is what our policy says, this is what he did, he's in direct violation and we suspended his account, then his account should probably be suspended, right? Because that's Twitter, they're a private company, is what it is. Now, when you mention the fact that Twitter had this list, this web compiled of people like him, with what seems to be, I don't want to say the advice, but the way that the emails were reading, it was like, well, the White House really wants to know if you guys are considering removing him.
Like the pressure, in a way.
Pressure is exactly the word that I was going to use. When you mention pressure from, the White House, the executive branch of our government, it's a bit of a different story, and makes me actually kind of concerned about the sanctity of Twitter, right? Because one thing that I admire about Twitter forever is that when they make a decision, they're going to stand behind it. And it seems to me if we can prove with these documents and then more emails and Slack conversations come out and we can prove that they kind of folded to the will of the government, that to me is a big alarm to be rung on Twitter, saying, hey, whoa, why are you guys abandoning these rights that you're afforded as a company, right? Because at the end of the day, the decision whether or not to activate or deactivate, remove or suspend a Twitter account lies with Twitter. Does not matter what the White House says, doesn't matter what anybody else says. It's down to Twitter and whatever their advisory committee or whoever the executive is that makes those decisions. If they gave that up in the face of pressure, that to me raises a lot of questions about why they did that, and is more of a commentary about the sanctity of that company. And maybe we shouldn't be using Twitter if they're so willing to cave to the government. Again, that's a bit of a cop-out answer. All that being said, it's wrong for the White House to reach out to a private company and say, hey, we noticed this guy's causing a ruckus. Are you guys going to do anything about that? The White House has a billion things that they should be worried about. The executive branch as an entirety is in charge of running a country, right, that deals with domestic affairs, foreign affairs, the economy, all these things. Why do they care what some reporter from the New York Times is putting out on his Twitter account? That is no business of the government, and they are entirely in the wrong for even making the request to know if this guy was going to remain on the platform. Speaks volumes to me about the priorities and perception that this White House wants to have.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with that point completely. Like, the President of the United States, not directly, but the President of the United States' office and his advisors and the employees of the President are concerned about a little bit of what they deem as dis or misinformation on Twitter, when it's like, there's a reason that people are listening to him. It's because they don't trust you. So maybe you should build up your own trust a little bit more, right? So I don't know. Personally, I think of myself, I wouldn't say free speech absolutist to like the T. Like, I don't think you should be able to say literally anything you want, but pretty close. And I think that it's clear, in my personal opinion, I think that it's clear that Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, these are where people have conversations, Reddit. And to shut down conversations, to shut down dialogue, even if you might not like it and you might think it's misinformation that people are spreading on the web, is completely ridiculous. And I think it's an elitist ploy to say, like, you're not allowed to think for yourself because it's misinformation, Stephen, and you're too stupid to realize that. So we're going to take it away from you so you can't see it at all. Right? Right? No. Okay, that's ridiculous. I think that that people are smart enough to cipher through information, and some people are going to fall into traps. Unfortunately, that happens. But make your side more convincing then. And quite frankly, if we're looking at this from now, hindsight being 2020, guess who seems to be right on most things? It's Alex Berenson on COVID vaccine skepticism and things like that. Like, the CDC is rolling back things, which we're going to talk about in a later block. Things like, now if you're vaccinated or unvaccinated, it's the same exact rules and regulations that apply to both people. And if you are in contact with COVID-19, now you don't have to isolate. Congratulations, provided you don't test positive. It's like, oh, what they were saying the literal entire time, and you labeled mis and disinformation and kicked them off Twitter and kicked them off YouTube and kicked them off Facebook and Reddit and so on and so forth. It's like, there comes a point where this just seems to be completely one-sided, completely doing the bidding of a government, even if it's not the direct bidding of the government, which in this case it seems like it might have been. But in general, like, doing the bidding of one side of the political aisle to take out the other side of the political aisle just because you disagree with them, instead of having that debate. And I think that that's the biggest threat here. And Section 230 is what the big tech companies cite for their reasons for doing stuff, which basically gives them some protections on being able to remove things from their platforms, right? Section 230 is like one of the biggest scams in American history and should be completely abolished. Like, it's ridiculous, actually. And if Congress had half a brain cell, they would remove it. But so I don't know. In my opinion, technology has obviously changed things, and it's almost like I mean, we use StreamYard to do this show. If StreamYard didn't like what we were saying using their program, and they kicked us off and said we weren't allowed to broadcast this using their platform, that's asinine. Sure, there's other platforms to use, but it's like the whole point of this is to broadcast, and just because you don't like what we're saying doesn't mean you could kick us off. And so I think that what we are seeing is the beginning steps of a change in how we look at these big tech companies and the roles of big tech companies from a constitutional perspective, from a legal perspective, and from an individual perspective.
Yeah. The other thing, and I'll be brief on this, that I want to just kind of throw out there, my personal policy when I'm coming across anything, relative to a conversation like this, I don't trust the government. Like, you should never fully trust the government. I don't care where you live, how much you love this country. Like, loving this country and trust for the government are two entirely different things, right?
Sure, absolutely.
And to your point, inquisitive people, like, it draws a line of suspicion if the government is saying, no, trust us, do this. And somebody's like, hey, man, well, what about this? And they're like, I don't listen to that guy. Actually kick him off everything so nobody can listen to that guy.
Right.
That raises a lot of red flags to me. The brilliant thing about this country is that we have this freedom of expression to engage in these conversations, to diversify our thought, to question authority, to question the people who, make and enforce the rules that we live by every day. And it's troubling, and I agree with you on this, that the venue, which seems to be the place now for most public discourse, is so vulnerable and susceptible to this kind of government intrusion, which at the end of the day is what it is. Like I said before, the fact that the White House even had the thought to ask Twitter about one guy's account and whether or not it was going to remain on their platform is sounding like a billion alarms in my head. Right. So I don't know what the remedy moving forward is. I do know that it is a great thing that Alex has his Twitter account back. In all honesty, I think that everybody should be allowed on Twitter. Like, I tend to agree with you that it is functionally a public square. There should be, I don't know what the medium, the middle ground on this is, but there has to be a middle ground. It can't be one way or the other. There has to be some kind of medium. Twitter still, in my opinion, should have the right to, monitor the content that comes across on their platform, because, there is certain liability issues there about what they're espousing and what they're allowing to be said.
But there isn't, though, because of Section 230. Like, those liabilities aren't there. You can't sue Twitter because somebody threatened you on Twitter.
No.
But they can remove you for not liking what you're saying. And, like, those two things don't square to me.
That's what I'm saying. There has to be some kind of line where there either is there is a degree of liability or there is no liability.
Right. Like, I don't care if we say, like, Twitter's not liable for what you say, just like, I don't know, Ocean County is not liable if I go into the middle of a public park and start espousing nonsense. Like, that's not Ocean County's fault. That is my fault, and I'm liable for that, right? But so if that's how we're going to treat Twitter, if that's the protections that they have, which is the protections that they do have, then you can't remove that person, right? If that person breaks the law, their content can be taken down, sure. But what Alex Berenson did wasn't breaking the law. What Donald Trump did to get removed from Twitter wasn't breaking the law. Like,
it's an interesting, very, very interesting case. And again, I think that we're going to see this, I would love to say in the next few months, but knowing the legal system within the decade, kind of clear-cut resolved with a lot of court cases dealing with this. Because, I mean, as you said, Alex took Twitter to court and got his account back. So
Right.
people clearly are not going to stand for this. And there is going to be a forced shift in how these platforms are allowed to operate. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, I don't know, I think, and I've had conversations with this with some former professors of mine. Um, Big tech is going to be like big tobacco. You're going to see some massive cases that completely change the industry.
yep.
And I think that it has to be that. I don't think there's another choice. Oh, if not cases, then we need people to step up legislatively and change things for the better. But
That's a big ask.
yeah, that's a big ask. They can't even do literally anything. So,
Yeah.
but speaking of legislative changes that have taken years, Stephen, let's do our next story.
Segway, AJ.
What can I say?
That's awesome. So this to be brief, a few years ago, 2020, Governor Murphy of New Jersey signed an energy plan that he claimed, this is a great quote, was going to be ground zero for weaning the state off its century-old addiction to fossil fuels. Right? I'm all about green energy, but that is like political rhetoric to the nine. So yesterday, the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities put out a 124-page study, which basically examines the transition to renewable sources of energy and the way that's going to impact the residents of New Jersey. And overall, it seems like there's not going to be that much of an initial cost expenditure like on the citizens associated with switching to these, green initiatives that are proposed in this bill. NJ.com has a phenomenal article up about this. They talk about the average cost of utilities over the next 10 years increasing, in fact, if they don't adopt some of the plans and programs that have been outlined in the bill that Murphy signed. So it seems to be that by the year 2030, we want to be 50% clean energy, and by 2050, 100% clean energy. Seems to be very, very hopeful goals. He cites things, dealing with sea level rise as the, reason for this kind of fast-paced attack on this plan. But again, as with any climate bill, you're dealing with a lot of hypothetical data, and you're moving a lot of money and making a lot of decisions for a lot of businesses. So even though there's a 124-page paper that I'm sure every single person who's listening is going to go and read and find out all the information they can on, that tells you that it's not going to be more expensive. Again, I'm going to give you the non-answer of let's just wait and see, because I find it hard to believe that transitioning half of our state's energy consumption methods to green energy isn't going to cost the taxpayers no money. That seems.
Yeah, and the article even says the critics of the package that did read all 124 pages and all that stuff that are saying you're not including everything in this. You're not including all of the issues that go along that will cost more money here. But I think what's interesting is I think you have to be fair and honest. To say that this isn't going to cost any more money is just not true. If you think this is an important thing, if you think that moving to green energy is what we need to do, be honest. And I think people will respect it a little bit more. Be a lot more. Just be look, okay, we think that this is an existential threat. We think that this is what we have to do. It's going to cost more money. Okay, your taxes are going to be raised, but you take the hit now so that your grandkids can enjoy the beach like you did, so that your grandkids can enjoy the Pine Barrens like you did, and so on and so forth, right? If you present it that way, I think that people understand it more and they're willing to maybe take that hit, and maybe they're not, and it's politics. You have to convince people of things sometimes. I'm sorry to break that news that not everybody's going to agree with you right away.
That is kind of the name of the game, isn't it?
Right. So it's just be honest. It's going to cost more money. I think everybody knows that. I think that Phil Murphy knows that. I think that the Democrats know that. I think that the people that wrote this report know that. That's why they redacted information. Look, I'm a conservative leaning guy, right? I'm a right wing leaning individual, but I'm also of the opinion, and I don't know how many of my uh, co-patriots on my side agree with this. Um, the Republican Party was founded on conservation of natural resources, natural lands with Teddy Roosevelt, right? So like the two big things that our party was founded on was like anti-slavery and equality for all, and conserving the environment for everybody. And I like the environment. I'm a big fan myself. And I don't agree with the left's methods on protecting and saving the environment. And that's why I most of the time disagree with their green energy ideas and platform and proposals. But the one thing I could say is at least they're proposing something, right? So it's wrong, in my opinion. It's too expensive. It doesn't have to be what they say it is. But and they're not being completely upfront and honest about that. But the reaction of that isn't to turn and run and do completely the opposite. It's how can we make this more cost effective? How does this make the most sense? Do I think that 2050 the world's gonna be burning and ending? No, I don't think that. But because they've been wrong before, they've been wrong. Like Al Gore was saying the world was going to be underwater right now, and I'm here, and it's not. So, but that doesn't mean that there's nothing we can do, and there's not ways that we can fix this. Like, you'll hear me jump on the soapbox of nuclear energy and geothermal energy till probably that either we do it or the day I die. So, I think what's important to note coming from this from a more conservative perspective is like, don't be mad that it's green energy. Be mad that they're lying to you that it's not going to cost any more money. And say, I'm fine with the green energy, but be honest with me and let's try and not do windmills and solar panels and do something that'll actually work for once. So,
I you know what? Nothing to follow up with, because as somebody who I've always said this though, and I'll say it again on this program. I think that most politicians are liars, right?
Really, Steven? That's news breaking. Let's get a Chiron going.
Stop the presses. This is breaking news. Most politicians are liars. I just like it when the lies sound good. And to me, the best lies come from the lips of Democrats. So, I
they're very good liars for sure. Yeah.
They are. No, they make it sound awesome. It fooled me, still fooling me. So, no, but to your point, something like this, it's very obvious, even for, me, who traditionally I'm going to support most of these green initiatives that Democrats put out. But to say that it's not going to cost taxpayers more money is like blasphemous. The first thing, like the primary understanding you have to have going into any discussion about green energy is that it is going to be expensive. Like, you enter that conversation knowing that, whether or not you agree or disagree with it, we can all agree it's going to be expensive. That's just the name of the game that we're playing here. But aside from that, I think you made a lot of great points. And per usual, you stuck up for conservatives pretty well. It's a hard job. It's not a hard job.
I mean, I don't think it's that hard, but and to just really briefly before we get into our last story, I think that my big thing with the budget and spending is that we spend a lot of money already. So it's almost like we should, in my opinion, we should cap our spending. Be like, okay, this is the amount of money we're spending. Like for the whole government, let's say it's $2 trillion, and I think it's more than that, but say it's $2 trillion. $2 trillion is enough money. Like, that's a lot, and we could do a lot with that money. So it's like we have 84,000 new IRS agents, right? You know what those 84,000 IRS agents should do, in my opinion? Instead of going to, the middle-class household down the block and audit their taxes, what they should do is they should audit all 50 states, complete audit of all 50 states, and any wasteful spending that's like really, really wasteful spending. You know what wasteful spending looks like. Completely say, okay, here is all your wasteful spending. your budget is state of New Jersey's budget, $500 billion. I don't know. I'm just picking a round number. So the state of New Jersey, $500 billion. Okay, this is all of your wasteful spending here. Okay, how about instead of spending your money there, which probably adds to multiple millions of dollars, maybe even billions, let's be honest. It's like, let's put all of that wasteful spending away from where you're spending it to places that actually matter, right? Okay, so use that money that was going there, put that into your green energy initiative or your bettering schools initiative, whatever the case may be. And the same can be said for the federal government.
I'm going to have to stop you. You're making too much sense.
Oh, sorry.
You're not allowed
I do that too often.
You're not allowed to do that.
But anyway, my favorite is when Rand Paul, like just going on YouTube and searching the Rand Paul videos of him, like, why are we spending money teaching goat farmers in Afghanistan how to properly use forks and knives? Like, why are we spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on that? It's, if you want a good time, just search up the Rand Paul government bloated spending videos. There's a million of them.
And on that, the best point and the greatest rhetorical tool for any conversation about this is when he says it, he'll say it won't be like, they're spending, $300,000 to teach goat farmers how to use forks and knives. It'll be, they're spending $300,000 of your money.
Right.
Teaching goat farmers in Afghanistan how to use forks and knives.
Right. It's not even like American goat farmers how to use forks and knives. It's like
the realization that it is your money that the government is collecting from you, which again, taxation, awesome conversation, could have another day. Really might open some eyes to just how wasteful our spending can be. So
yeah, for sure. But let's get to our last story, and this is, in my opinion, a pretty interesting one, and it won't be super long, and it has to deal with our wonderful home state and our Rutgers Scarlet Knights. So the University of Rutgers has announced that they will still be requiring face coverings for all indoor teaching spaces, libraries, and clinical settings, and at outdoor events for the 22-23 school year. All students and employees are required to be fully vaccinated and boosted when they are eligible. And they cite the ongoing spread of the BA.5 Omicron subvariant as the reason for their policies. And this comes just a few days after Governor Murphy says the state will no longer require weekly testing for unvaccinated school children and employees. And the CDC came out and changed the quarantine rules, saying that people who are not up to date on vaccines or not vaccinated at all no longer have to quarantine for 10 days, but only for 5. And if they don't test positive, they don't have to quarantine at all. That's for both vaccinated and unvaccinated. They changed the isolation requirements for vaccinated and unvaccinated, and the testing requirements, basically, and social distancing, saying that there is no need for that anymore. Basically saying it doesn't matter if you're vaccinated or not, everybody's playing by the same freaking rules. Rutgers, however, says, nope, fully vaccinated, fully masks for indoor and outdoor events for the 2022-2023. I'm sorry, did I say indoor and outdoor? Or is it just indoor events? I might have... No, yeah, just indoor events. My bad. Not outdoor events, thankfully. So like the football games where there's thousands of people next to each other rubbing up, like that's perfectly fine. But not the basketball games. So I think that it's very interesting. So I'm starting, as you guys know, I just started law school at Villanova, right? So Villanova University is, you have to be vaccinated, but you don't have to be boosted there. You don't have to wear masks indoor unless a teacher asks you to. So it's up to discretion of a teacher in a classroom. But other than that, there's no mask mandate. There's no vax mandate past your first 2 shots or 1 shot for Johnson & Johnson. And I mean, I don't even think that you should have that initial vaccine mandate, but like if you're going to, there's other vaccine mandates that the schools have, right, for living on campus. So whatever, it is what it is. But And but the biggest difference there is that Villanova, if they had the rules of Rutgers, that's one thing because Villanova is a private school, right? Rutgers is a state school. And they're forcing masking indoors in 2022, 2023. Like, how ridiculous can you be? I don't understand. If I was going to Rutgers, I would be like, all right, screw this, I'm done. Like, I'm out. I'll go somewhere else. I'll transfer. I mean, Rutgers is a fine school, but that's ridiculous. Like, it's college. People, you think that these students are going to do that in their dorms? Really? Let's be honest.
Well, on top of that, and again, I'll
I'd be
use
more worried
this.
about STDs than COVID.
They should
Like,
be. They should be. Um, I mean, listen, let's call a spade a spade. I've not read any serious reporting about the severity of COVID, the spread of COVID. Like, you know what the most recent story I read about COVID was that Joe Biden had it, and now Joe
oh,
Biden
Jill
has
Biden has, yeah, right.
it. Okay. So we're just keeping tabs on sick people. That's what this story has become to me. And I don't say this to, diminish the severity of it at its height, at its peak, to, make a mockery of people who lost their lives, family, loved ones, friends, whatever it may be. Like, there's very clearly serious issues and awful repercussions as a result of this pandemic. But
Right, from 2020 when we didn't know anything. Yeah, sure.
in 2021, we didn't know anything. Now we've had these vaccines out for well over a year, almost 2 years, and it should be a choice whether or not you want to get this vaccine for this, disease that seems to be not affecting many people anymore. And for an institution where there's going to be tons of kids who, and this is what really kills me, these are people who are here willingly, who want to seek higher education, who want to be a part of a community that is also seeking higher education. You're going to say, yeah, that's fine, you can do that, but you have to wear a mask, you have to be vaccinated, like, you have to do all of these things in order to get access to this public education. That's bananas to me. Uh, and on a personal note, if you're a business and you still require me to wear a mask when I walk in there, you are not a business that I will be, doing business with. I'm sorry. That's
Yeah.
what it is. And whether it's the coffee shop around the corner or a state college, like, that principle holds true, because we don't have enough time to go into, like, why it is such an issue to force these quite literal, like, facial coverings on individuals, and you have to have 3 shots to go learn about, psychology on campus in Newark. Like, it's
No, and
ridiculous. It's
I
ridiculous.
think most people agree that it's ridiculous. I think that most people understand that at this point it's ridiculous. And I think the big thing is, what are you're a school, you're an education center. What are you teaching these kids? To be compliant? Shut up and be compliant. You don't have a choice. You don't have a choice here. You don't have a choice for your own body. You don't have a choice for what you put onto your body and you wear, right? You don't.
It's
And
tr-
and not only that, we're a government sponsored institution, right? It's one thing if you're going to a, super religious school and they have certain dress codes or whatever else, right? But you're not. You're going to a state school, a state sponsored school. And it's ridiculous. They're teaching you to be compliant to the state, to the authority, and be compliant to authority when authority makes sense. I think that one of the best rules I ever heard is don't follow stupid rules.
yeah,
But
yeah.
then be prepared to face the consequences of not following those stupid rules.
And the other thing, to your point, if this was, a public school, and we're talking about kindergartners who aren't necessarily the most sanitary individuals, who don't really have, a firm understanding of, like, social concepts of, like, personal space, and may not know to cover their nose every time that they sneeze, right? That could make a lot more sense.
No, that'd be even worse though, because like they need to look at people's mouths to learn how to speak at that point.
Well,
Like I,
But I'm just making the point that you're dealing now, at a
with adults. Yeah.
higher education institution with individuals like 18, 17, 18, all the way up. There's people in their 70s attending school, right? Like straight up adults. And you're telling them what to do, like how to function, how to be present on a facility. It makes no sense to me.
It's all about how to feel safe, right? Like making people. I feel safer if you wore a mask. It's like nobody cares.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, nobody cares. I don't care, honestly. Like, if I go into your classroom, you want me to wear a mask. Like, I'll be respectful enough. I'm gonna do it begrudgingly. I said this, just anecdote. It's like when I was helping my mom and dad move in to their new house.
Mm-hmm.
I was complaining, and they're like, "Why are you complaining?" I said, "Look, am I helping you move in? Yeah, but I'm gonna complain the whole time. Like, I don't. I am not a physical laborer. I'm going to law school for a reason. So I'll help you move in because I love you and you're my parents, but I'm going to complain the entire time. So I will wear a mask for your class because I'm respectful enough for you as an individual, but I'm going to complain about it. And I'm going to tell you it's kind of stupid.
Absolutely.
So, but with Rutgers, the mandate of the whole school doesn't matter what the professor cares about, doesn't matter anything else. It's like ridiculous. It's just teaching people to succumb to authority, and just stupid authority too. Like the ones that even the CDC is now admitting that they've made mistakes all the way in the past. Like they went back and they said, "Hey, sorry, we've really screwed that one up." It's over. But speaking of things being over, we have ran way over time. But that's okay. I mean, we're not really on a time limit, but like a personal time limit.
Yeah.
We try and keep it under an hour, right?
My computer's time limit.
So, with that, this was another episode of Bridging the Gap here on the Jersey First TV network. I'm AJ Malillo.
I am Stephen Romolo.
And we hope to see you all next week for another great episode. See you, everybody.